In today's world, where everyone seems to be rushing through life as if competing with something invisible, we wake up each morning holding on to the hope that life will somehow become better, trying to work harder, earn more, and build a future that feels more secure, quietly believing deep inside that one day, when success finally arrives, happiness will surely follow. But have you ever noticed something strange? No matter whether we look at top performers, powerful corporate leaders, or even billionaires surrounded by unimaginable wealth, their lives are still filled with worry, stress, fear, and nights where sleep refuses to come. And slowly a question begins to surface: what if suffering has never cared about status, talent, or success at all? Because no matter how much money someone has, they still fear losing it. No matter how capable they become, they still fear failure. And even when life seems complete, the fear of loss quietly remains. And right at this point, a deeper truth begins to reveal itself. Perhaps the true source of suffering has never existed in the outside world, but has always been hidden within the way our minds interpret reality. Modern humanity is facing a kind of illness that requires no hospital visit, no blood test, and no instant medicine, an endless hunger for happiness. We scroll endlessly searching for something that makes us feel better, buy things hoping to feel fulfilled, set new goals the moment old ones are achieved, spending our entire lives chasing the feeling that happiness is just one step away. Yet strangely, the faster we run, the more exhausted we become, the more we gain, the less satisfied we feel, like drinking seawater that only deepens thirst, until many begin to wonder whether true happiness even exists, or if we have simply been chasing its shadow all along. The fully enlightened Buddha revealed something astonishingly simple. Life does not suffer merely because the world is cruel, but because we do not truly understand things as they are. We want reality to follow our expectations, and when it doesn't, the mind resists, disappointment arises, struggle begins, and suffering appears instantly. Not always because events themselves are painful, but because our thoughts refuse to accept truth. Our way of thinking becomes the steering wheel of life. Hold it in the wrong direction and even the finest vehicle will crash. Yet turn it slightly, and the entire journey changes. The problem is that most people never realize how they are thinking. We believe our thoughts without ever questioning them, until those very thoughts become the architects of our suffering without our awareness. But the moment we begin opening our hearts to the teachings of the Buddha, the one who discovered truth through direct understanding, we find that his teachings never demanded escape from the world, never required abandoning ordinary life or retreating to special places. Instead, they gently invite us to return and observe our own minds right in the middle of everyday living. Because Dhamma is not distant philosophy, it is the art of living with reality without wounding our own hearts. Suffering is profoundly universal. Walk into a room filled with 100 people and ask each person to share their burden, and you will discover that no one is truly free from suffering, only the forms differ. Some struggle with money, others with love, some suffer under the weight of their own expectations, while others suffer despite having everything. This is why the Buddha spoke plainly that birth itself carries suffering as a natural condition. Yet what deepens suffering is not suffering itself, but our attempt to solve it through ignorance. We use desire to cure desire, escape to silence fear, control to fight uncertainty, and in the end we become more exhausted than before. Approaching Dhamma therefore is not an escape from life, but a learning of how to live more lightly, creating an inner space of calm where no matter how chaotic the outside world becomes, we can still remain grounded, because when the way we think changes, the same world immediately feels different, and perhaps the happiness we have chased our entire lives was never something waiting somewhere ahead, but simply the moment we stop running and begin understanding life as it truly is for the very first time. It is precisely at this point that many people begin to question life seriously, wondering if success is not the final answer, if having more does not truly bring inner peace. Then what exactly are we running toward? Because the longer we live, the clearer it becomes that exhaustion does not come from work alone, but from a mind that is constantly chasing a certain feeling without rest, for something new to make ourselves feel better again and again. And when we dare to look more deeply, we begin to realize that behind nearly every decision in life, whether small or life-changing, revolves around a single word: happiness. And this realization quietly becomes a turning point, inviting us to pause and question whether we have ever truly understood what happiness really is, or if all this time, we have simply been running after something without ever stopping to see it clearly even once. If we truly pause and observe our own lives carefully, we begin to notice that almost every moment of the day, we are running after something called happiness. From the very second we wake up, the mind already starts planning: what should I eat today? What should I watch to relax? What can I do to feel just a little better? And almost automatically, we believe happiness exists in moments of satisfaction, like drinking our favorite cup of coffee, enjoying delicious food, admiring a beautiful view, or even receiving a message from someone we long to hear from. Yet when we look a little deeper, an interesting truth slowly reveals itself, because these moments of happiness arise incredibly fast and disappear just as quickly. Before the food arrives, there is anticipation. When it finally comes, there is pleasure. And once we are full, the happiness quietly ends, and almost instantly the mind begins searching for the next thing without us even noticing, as if life were a game moving from level to level with no true finish line. We wait for the weekend. When the weekend comes, we wait for a vacation. After returning, we wait for the next holiday. And eventually we realize we have been living more in future hope than in understanding what is actually happening right now. And the striking part is that we have never truly seen hope itself. We only see images in the mind, expectations, stories created internally, and yet we believe them completely. Which makes this kind of happiness astonishingly fragile, because it depends entirely on external conditions. If the food tastes good, we feel happy, but if the flavor changes even slightly, the happiness vanishes immediately. If someone speaks kindly, we feel at ease, but a small shift in tone suddenly weighs down the heart. Even though the outside world changes only a little, the inner experience can flip from joy to suffering within a fraction of a second. Simply because we unconsciously cling to the idea that reality should match our desires, while in truth everything is constantly changing. The Buddha pointed to a truth so profound that many people hear it yet overlook its depth. Nothing remains even for a single moment. Everything arises, exists briefly, and passes away continuously. Even the happiness we believe we possess is merely a mental phenomenon appearing for an instant. When we see a flower, the mind recognizes it and pleasure arises. That moment of consciousness appears and disappears immediately, leaving only memory behind, which then makes us crave the experience again, and so life becomes an unconscious cycle of chasing the same feelings over and over. We are not truly seeking the flower, nor the food, but the feeling of satisfaction itself. And without understanding the nature of the mind, we mistakenly believe what stands before us can provide lasting happiness, when in reality it only stimulates temporary sensations. Once that moment of mind fades, everything ends right there. If that mental moment does not arise again, there is no me, no you, no remaining story at all. And rather than making life frightening, this truth unlocks something immense, because it reveals that our repeated disappointment does not come from a cruel world, but from expecting the impermanent to become permanent. We want happiness to stay, even though its very nature is to pass. And when this becomes clear, a new kind of happiness begins to emerge, one that does not depend on perfection, but arises from seeing clearly that every experience comes and goes, and that we do not need to spend our lives endlessly chasing it, life begins to feel strangely lighter, because instead of exhausting ourselves trying to preserve happiness, we learn to live through every moment without resistance. Whether joy or sorrow, each becomes simply a wave that arrives and moves on. And when seen this way, the endless tension of waiting for the future slowly loosens, not because hope disappears, but because we begin to understand that lasting happiness is not something waiting ahead. It is the awakening to the truth of each present moment unfolding right here, a simple yet profoundly powerful secret of life, one that most people spend an entire lifetime before finally beginning to see. And when we begin to truly see that both happiness and suffering arise and fade away like waves, none of which can remain still forever, we immediately start to notice something deeper, that the force causing these waves to rise again and again does not exist in the outside world at all, but within the inner process of our own mind. Because every time happiness appears, the mind is the one that interprets it, and every time suffering arises, the mind is the one that magnifies it further. And behind all of these interpretations lies a silent force working 24 hours a day without us even realizing it. That force is thought itself. And the moment we begin to turn inward and observe our own thoughts seriously, we gradually come to understand that life is not shaped so much by what happens to us, but by what we think about what happens. And right at this very point lies the essential doorway that leads us to witness the true power of the mind. If there is one thing that silently shapes the direction of our lives more powerfully than anything else, it is not fate, not money, not opportunity, and not even the people around us, but the thoughts constantly arising within our own minds. Because every word we speak, every decision we make, every relationship we build, and even the future we are walking toward, always begins with a single fleeting moment of thought beforehand. Thought is like an invisible seed, capable of growing into either a garden of flowers or a forest of thorns within the very same life. Many times we say life is exhausting, that work is heavy, that people create problems, or that the world itself feels overwhelming. But if we look deeply enough, we begin to see that what truly tires us is not the event itself, but the story we keep replaying about that event. An incident may happen only once, yet the mind can replay it hundreds of times, expanding suffering far beyond reality, and so much of our stress is not created by the outside world, but quietly manufactured by the mind without our awareness. The phrase, "If there is no thinking, there is no stress," may sound simple. Yet human beings cannot stop thinking, because we rely on thought to solve problems, to plan finances, to navigate economic pressures, to manage relationships, and to survive in the real world. The problem therefore is not thinking itself, but thinking without realizing we are thinking far beyond what is necessary. Often, we search for answers while the mind is already exhausted, like trying to find a way out of a dark room with the lights turned off. The more we move, the more we collide, the more we think, the more trapped we become, and the more urgently we force ourselves to find answers, the tighter and more strained the mind grows. The secret most people overlook is not learning how to think better, but knowing when to stop thinking. Because not every problem must be solved immediately, not every situation requires an instant decision, and not every worry needs an answer tonight. Thinking on top of thinking while the mind is fatigued is like accelerating a car when the fuel tank is nearly empty. The engine only breaks down faster. Temporarily stopping thought is not escaping problems, but preserving mental energy so clarity can return stronger than before. Many people have experienced how a solution that never appeared all day suddenly arises while showering, walking, or simply gazing at the sky. And this is no coincidence, because when the mind relaxes from the pressure of relentless thinking, intelligence and insight begin to function naturally once again. Stepping out of repetitive thought patterns is like opening a window in a suffocating room, simply lifting your eyes toward the far horizon, watching the vast sky, observing treetops swaying with the wind, or allowing your gaze to rest away from concrete walls and glowing phone screens. The mind that once felt confined within problems slowly begins to expand, and the inner heat quietly fades without effort. In truth, the mental crisis of modern life does not always arise from having more problems, but from a mind that has no space to rest. Thoughts continue running like a machine that is never switched off. When we learn to pause, to set things down, to allow certain questions to remain unanswered for now, we discover a surprising new power: stillness that is not dull but ready, calmness that does not escape the world but allows us to see it more clearly. And when the mind is no longer dragged endlessly by restless thoughts, we begin to realize that many problems were never as large as we once believed. They only appeared overwhelming because the mind itself was exhausted. Changing life therefore does not require changing the entire world. It may begin simply by noticing a single thought and choosing not to follow it immediately, because in the very moment we become aware of thought, we reclaim our freedom. And that is the true power of a mind quietly awakening from its own chaos, silent, yet profoundly transformative within a human life. And when we begin to clearly recognize the true power of thought, the most important question is no longer simply how we should think in order to improve our lives, but how we can live alongside those thoughts without being dragged away by them for an entire lifetime. Because in the real world, thought never stops working even for a single second. It continues to flow endlessly like a current of water, arriving again and again without pause. And it is precisely at this moment that humanity discovers something profound, that what truly transforms our relationship with thought is not the attempt to control it, but the presence of something within us that remains awake amidst the endless stream of thinking. Because in the daily lives of most people, stress does not arrive loudly or announce itself in advance. It quietly seeps in through small thoughts that we allow to run freely without noticing, beginning from something seemingly insignificant, a careless remark from someone, unfinished work, or a vague worry about the future, and then the mind continues thinking, adding stories, adding meaning, adding assumptions, until a small matter slowly grows into something overwhelming. Even though the actual event may have passed long ago, the mind refuses to move on with it. And it was precisely at this point that the Buddha discovered the most essential tool for dealing with human suffering, mindfulness, which is neither mysterious nor reserved for religious rituals or special places of silence, but a simple yet immensely powerful ability, the ability to be aware while everything is unfolding. Mindfulness is like an executioner that does not kill thoughts, nor fight against stress, but cuts its cycle the moment awareness steps in, because stress only gains power when we unconsciously become part of the thought itself. Yet the instant mindfulness arises, we begin to see that something is thinking, and at the same time, something else is aware that thinking is happening. And this marks a profound turning point in true spiritual practice, because genuine practice is not about forcing the mind to be calm, nor about stopping thought altogether, but about separating the thinker from the knower. In the past, when anger arose, we instantly became an angry person. When worry appeared, we immediately became the worrier. But as mindfulness grows stronger, we begin to notice that anger is arising, worry is arising, while another part of the mind quietly observes from a distance, like someone watching clouds drift across the sky. Clouds come and go, yet the sky never becomes the clouds. Thoughts are the same, they arise, remain for a while, and naturally pass away according to their own nature. Think back to the worries that once kept you awake a month ago. Do they still hold the same power today? Most have already disappeared, often without us even remembering the details. And even intense anger, if we do not keep digging it up, retelling it, or fueling it with new stories, dissolves on its own as though it never truly existed. Because all thoughts and emotions are temporary conditions, not our permanent identity, yet we suffer deeply because we believe our thoughts too quickly, take their side, and defend them as if they were ourselves. When mindfulness begins to function, we gradually see reality as it truly is, recognizing that both wholesome and unwholesome thoughts share the same destiny. They arise and eventually cease. No thought can remain forever. And choosing not to immediately believe every thought, not to judge based on emotion, and not to rush into defending ourselves becomes a powerful form of freedom, because it allows wholesome qualities to quietly accumulate within the heart, while unwholesome tendencies weaken naturally without suppression or force. And as we learn to live more as the observer rather than the one lost in reaction, a new kind of peace begins to emerge, one that does not depend on the world becoming calm first, but can exist even amidst chaos, because no matter how intense thoughts may become, mindfulness can simply continue knowing without resistance. And in the very moment we become aware of a thought, stress is cut off instantly like an electrical circuit losing its current. This is why mindfulness is called the executioner of suffering, not because it destroys the outside world, but because it removes the hidden authority of thoughts that once controlled our lives without our awareness. And as we begin to live more as the one who knows rather than the one who blindly follows, a happiness that no longer needs to be chased quietly starts to appear within, gradually growing into a stability that no circumstance can easily take away anymore. And when we begin to see for ourselves that thoughts are not who we are, but merely passing phenomena that come and go, the most important question is no longer where we can find peace of mind, but rather how we can live with this awareness in the midst of real life. Because if peace must wait for the world to become quiet first, we may never truly begin at all. And it is precisely this shift in understanding that frees spiritual practice from its old image, returning it to the simplicity of everyday living, where awakening is no longer separated from ordinary life, but becomes something genuinely accessible within the life we are already living. Many people grow up believing that spiritual practice is something distant, something reserved for those who have free time, who wear white robes, who sit quietly in temples, or at the very least must wait until life becomes less chaotic before they can begin. Yet the deeply fascinating truth is that the Dhamma taught by the Buddha was never designed to exist only in sacred places. It was created precisely for the midst of real, messy, everyday life itself, because the true training ground of the mind is not a meditation hall, but the work desk, the traffic-filled road, the kitchen, the endlessly ringing phone, or even the very moments when we are facing the heaviest problems of our lives. That, right there, is the real space of practice. Many times we believe we have no time to train the mind, but in reality, opportunities to practice are present throughout the entire day. We simply do not recognize them, because the moment awareness is present in whatever we are doing, typing, washing dishes, driving, or speaking with someone, the mind naturally begins to gather itself. Distraction softens without force, concentration slowly arises on its own, like water becoming still the moment it is no longer disturbed. And at this point, the Dhamma becomes alive, no longer knowledge confined to books, but a direct experience that can truly be felt. For the real temple is not a building or a location, but the state of our mind in this very moment, because when the mind is calm, even chaos feels like a temple, yet when the mind is restless, even sitting inside a temple remains filled with endless wandering thoughts. Practicing in daily life therefore does not mean adding another burden, but transforming the way we live with the very things already present, bringing more awareness into what already exists. And the most important starting point is not any special technique, but the simple belief that we can do it, because the moment the mind decides it cannot, every door closes before the journey even begins. But when we allow ourselves to try, even in small ways, the mind begins to learn, like muscles gradually strengthening through use. Many people want immediate calm, quick results. Yet the development of the mind is no different from a child learning to walk. A child walks not because they never fall, but because they fall again and again, each fall becoming new information for learning. Life is the same. Moments of distraction, wandering thoughts, or losing awareness are not failures of practice. They are essential parts of learning itself, and the faster we recognize that we have lost awareness, the faster mindfulness grows. A life that dares to step forward and fall carries far greater value than standing still out of fear of mistakes. Because those who never begin will never experience true understanding of their own mind. And as mindfulness is practiced repeatedly through small daily actions, quiet transformations begin to appear. The mind that was once heated becomes cooler, the hurried mind slows, the restless mind gradually opens and clears without needing to escape the world or abandon any responsibility. Dhamma is therefore not something that must wait for free time, but something that transforms every ordinary day into a field of inner training, until one day we discover that working itself becomes meditation, living itself becomes contemplation, and every mindful breath becomes a step along the path of practice without needing to go anywhere at all, because the true field of awakening has always existed within the very life we are living right now. And as we begin to bring mindfulness more fully into real life, another truth slowly starts to reveal itself. No matter how well we practice, there will still be days when the mind feels restless. Days when thoughts surge in uninvited, overwhelming us without warning. And it is precisely at this point that many people encounter one of the most important questions in mental training. If awareness has already arisen, yet the thoughts refuse to stop, what should we do with them next? Because in truth, no one goes home and instantly switches off the mind. Suffering does not end when work is over. It follows us into the car, returns with us to our rooms, lies down beside us on the bed, and continues speaking inside our heads. Many people try to command themselves to stop thinking, yet the more they command, the more the mind races, the more they resist, the more restless it becomes until they begin to feel like failures. Even though in reality, this is no one's fault at all, it is simply the true nature of the mind itself. Because every thought, once it begins, carries its own structure, a beginning, an expansion, emotions, and a conclusion, like a movie unfolding on a screen. And when mindfulness is not yet strong enough, trying to jump in and stop the story midway is no different from shouting at the screen to make the film freeze. The harder we try, the more exhausted we become, and the more we resist, the more unknowingly we are pulled into becoming a character within that very story. Therefore, point to a method that is simple yet profoundly deep. We do not need to defeat our thoughts, because thoughts are not enemies. The task is not to stop them, but to cut off their fuel, because every thought survives on energy, and that fuel is repeated interpretation, revisiting old stories, and taking our own side. Especially when we feel hurt or angry, the mind instinctively gathers evidence proving we are right and others are wrong, and each repetition is like adding firewood to a flame, causing thoughts to burn stronger and stronger. Yet the moment we stop feeding them, stop searching for more justification, stop replaying the same events again and again, the fire naturally weakens like flames fading when fuel runs out. This is not theory, but something that can be tested immediately in real life. One of the simplest and most effective methods is to change posture, because mind and body are never separate. Simply standing up, walking, washing your face, organizing your desk, tidying something small that requires awareness, can instantly interrupt the spinning momentum of thought, like a gear slipping out of motion. Another powerful tool often overlooked is the breath. Because the breath is the bridge between body and mind. Just 5 slow deep inhalations followed by long gentle exhalations, and the body begins to soften, the tense brain relaxes, the heartbeat slows, and in that brief moment, the mind is pulled back into the present, like someone about to drown suddenly grasping the edge of the pool. And as we begin to see this again and again, a deeper understanding gradually unfolds. We start to recognize that thoughts never stay forever. Emotions, whether love, anger, sorrow, or even happiness we wish could last, are merely conditions arising from causes and inevitably passing away. Time itself already carries the power to heal emotional wounds, yet it cannot work if we keep reopening those wounds through repeated thinking. Every time we revisit the past with the same emotion, we bring finished events back to life within our own minds. But one day, when we truly see that every emotion comes and goes, that nothing remains fixed, not even the self we once believed to be permanent, the tight grip of having a self that must carry everything slowly begins to loosen in silence. From constantly fighting change, the mind learns instead to watch phenomena arise, remain, and fade according to their nature. And in that very moment, the deceptive cycle that once trapped us in suffering begins to lose its power, because we no longer believe every story the mind tells. A new kind of peace then quietly appears, a peace that does not require escaping the world, does not demand forcing the mind into calmness, does not depend on making everything perfect, but arises from deeply understanding the truth of life itself. This happiness needs no pursuit, no clinging, and no fear of loss, because it no longer depends on external circumstances, but emerges from recognizing the true nature of the mind, seeing things exactly as they are, and allowing life to unfold according to causes and conditions as it naturally should. And in the end, we discover that the lightness we have searched for all our lives was never far away, never waiting for a special day. It begins instantly, in the very moment we stop trying to control everything, and instead turn toward understanding it truly and directly for ourselves. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If you enjoyed this kind of content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and join us as we continue the journey through many more stories together in the next episode.